Hey everyone, Eric Watson here, freelance writer, player of games, writer of words, recorder of videos, and tabletop role-playing aficionado. Welcome to my D&D 2024 player class series. With this video, we're going to take a deep dive into the Druid class from the D&D 2024 Player's Handbook, including a class breakdown, differences between the 2014 version, my top 5 species and backgrounds, and my personal subclass rankings. And at the very end, I will build our very own brand new Druid using the new rules via the Roll20 Character Mancer. If you enjoyed these videos and want to support my channel, please check out patreon.com/RogueWatson. The Druid is a class I really like. In fact, I generally, by the way, I apologize if I sound like extra nasally. I don't know if it's allergies or I'm trying to fight off something that's coming, but I'm trying to make successful Constitution saving throws. I like nature-themed classes, I guess, including, the big spellcasters. I love any kind of skill set or power that lets me shapeshift. I grew up reading the Animorphs books back in the day and absolutely loved it. Read like whatever 30 of them or something. And I loved the 5th edition Druid because it gave you the wild shape right off the bat, and in fact had a subclass that was like all about doing wild shapes as a combat thing, and that just feels so cool for the player. For the DM, it was horribly overpowered. So I agree with the wild shape nerf that has come down upon the Druids. It really desperately didn't happen. Now, I say that, but I do think wild shape is awesome. And I would even go so far as to say I wish they would take it further with the Druid, or at least with maybe a subclass of the Druid, and just give me a Druid that's like the Druid from the D&D Honor Among Thieves movie. Like, just give me wild shape, like really cool, awesome wild shapes I can do like constantly. And I think that has so much cool potential in games, in combat, out of combat, all of that, in lieu of like spellcasting. Even basically, you can give me some like spell-like effects, but that's how I would want to do a Druid. However, the Druid and by the way, when I played like older editions of D&D, I was really upset that I couldn't like wild shape as much. The Druid basically just had like an animal companion with being a full spellcaster, and then only later on could you actually shapeshift. I remember playing like Baldur's Gate 1, I think, and starting off with the Druid because I was like, oh man, this looks so cool. I could be able to shapeshift at some point, but like you can't do it to like way higher level, and then by the time you get to that level, you're like done with the game. I was really annoyed by that. So I like that they front loaded the wild shaping feature, but it has definitely been nerfed big time in this 5.5 edition. So the Druid is, where's my little list? There it is. The primary ability is Wisdom, exactly like the Cleric, Divine Spellcaster. Complexity is high, I guess. You're a full spellcaster up to level 9. I guess they consider the wild shape thing is a little more complicated than the channel divinity, which I would probably agree with. And a lot of the subclasses have extra abilities that then proc off of using those wild shape uses. So that's probably what bumps it over to the high complexity. And you should play Druid if you like nature. The Druid likes nature, which, yeah, that definitely makes sense. It's probably the single best description of all of these that we've had so far. The Druid has a D8 per level, makes it just fairly average, I guess. Saving throw proficiencies, intelligence, or wisdom. Wisdom is really good. Intelligence, not so much. Skill proficiencies, about as you would expect. Pretty good list, though, altogether. Survival, animal handling, arcana, insight, medicine, perception. These are all great skills to have. Weapon proficiencies are only simple, and armor is only light armor and shields. Now, well, we'll get into it in a second, but when they get to level 1, it's basically exactly like the Cleric, where you can actually choose to take on the better armor and weapon sets, and they got rid of the metal armor restrictions that were a thing in older editions of D&D, which kind of makes sense because the Druid's all about like nature shit and can only use like certain weapons and armor. And even the 2014 edition, I believe, had those restrictions. This edition finally has 0 restrictions, keeps it very uncomplicated, and it's either light armor or medium armor. So the Druid, oh, by the way, the Druid has like no money to start with. That's something you should keep in mind. If you're going to play a Druid, you only start with leather armor, a shield, and a sickle, and then your basic kind of kits and 9 gold, or you can just start with 50 gold. So something to keep in mind that if you want to take a medium armor at level 1, which you can do, your starting equipment is really not going to be able to afford like the good medium armors or even some of the more fancier weapons. Like, just be aware the Druid has the lowest, I believe, the single lowest, they may be tied with somebody else, amount of starting money they have, which again makes sense. You're kind of the nature hippie. So we've got a lot of changes with the Druid that we're going to go over. First of all, level 1. We're a full spellcaster, obviously. We also always have Speak with Animals prepared. I'm almost tempted to just say, well, you should just be able to cast that at will. But Speak with Animals is a ritual spell, which means ritual rules are the same as 2014. You can spend an additional 10 minutes casting the spell, which I think it already took like a little bit of time to cast. And then it wouldn't cost a spell slot anyway. So it's kind of like having an at will, but you just can't use it in combat. I guess you have to have it up. It's one of those things you could almost always have up, like Detect Magic, to be like, oh yeah, I always want to be able to talk to animals, which I may require my player to actually let me know about that. But if those of you who, again, enjoy playing Baldur's Gate, you know how amazing it is to do Speak with Animals, but be aware your DM is probably not going to be as prepared. But maybe you should warn them if you're playing a Druid. Be like, hey, by the way, I like speaking with animals. And your DM's like, okay, well, I need to be prepared every time I mention a random bird or a deer or something around that's a potential NPC you're going to talk to. Druids, I don't know if Druidic is it is. Secret Language of Druids is still a language that you know. And then at level 1, you can choose, exactly like the Cleric, by the way, you can choose to be a more melee focused Druid or a more just backline focused Druid. Unlike a Cleric, I think a Druid has less things that support a Druid being in the front line, but because you've got shields, and you could potentially, with taking the Warden Primal, this is all new for the 2024 version, by the way, you gain proficiency with medium armor and martial weapons. So suddenly you become pretty decent at being in the front. And medium armor, as long as you have a +2 dex or something, you can easily get, probably a 15, 16, 17 AC, and then you add the shield on top of that, and suddenly you've got a pretty damn good AC, and you'll probably get a Cloak of Protection or something at some point. The other option is, exactly like the Cleric, you can instead choose to gain an extra cantrip, and then you gain a bonus to certain intelligence checks, in this case Arcana or Nature, equal to your Wisdom modifier. So cantrip lists are, pretty good. There's a lot of good cantrip spells. It annoys me that you don't automatically get the Druid Craft cantrip. I feel like that should be an automatic, like Speak with Animals is. But I don't believe it is that you get that one. Yeah, it doesn't say that it's just a recommended one that you take, right? So Magician would let you kind of take additional ones. I mean, Thorn Whip is good. Starry Wisp is kind of a cool new Circle of Stars themed cantrip you can take. Poison Spray, Elementalism is like Thaumaturgy, Guidance, Message, Produce Flame. These are all pretty decent cantrips to get. So those are your two options. Unlike the Cleric, where suddenly you can take Heavy Armor, which is a pretty big deal, this one, and I feel like the Cleric can be more frontline, and I just think of the Cleric as being more frontline than a Druid. So maybe I wouldn't necessarily take Warden every time. And also, I don't think any of the subclasses, unlike Cleric, necessarily lend themselves to you being in the front line. Plus, you can always Wild Shape. And if you're Wild Shaping, then your AC is going to be different than what it is here. So for all those reasons, I don't see Warden as being like the must-take as the equivalent of the Cleric one was. Although, even when we built on my own Cleric at the end of that video, like, I still took the other one, right? Because I was like, I don't plan on being a frontline. So it's just kind of that choice you need to make pretty early, as do you plan on being up front and using maybe a cooler weapon than what you have, or do you plan on mostly casting spells? That's basically your option. You are a full 9th level spellcaster. You've got great spell options, so don't feel like you need to take that medium armor completely, but it always is nice to have some better AC. But be aware you might have to play a few sessions before you can actually afford to buy to buy like the really good medium armor, I should say. Level 2 Wild Shape. This is probably one of the biggest changes in the 2024 book from one class to another, other than maybe like Warlock. We'll get into that. And Wild Shape generally works very similar to 5e. In fact, it works completely the same. You still get to transform into a beast. The CR level cannot be more than 1/4, so it's a literal like regular ass beast, like a spider, wolf. You can actually turn into a horse, which is kind of weird because presumably other players would then ride you. And so it's all of that is the same, where you transform and you gain like the physical stats of the beast, but you still maintain your mental stats, your intelligence, wisdom, charisma scores, any class features and feats that you have, any saving throws and proficiency bonuses and all that. Although if the beast is higher, you can gain those. The biggest difference, though, and the one that really needed to happen, is the hit points are no longer do you gain the beast's hit points. Instead, you retain your own hit points whenever you transform. Actually, I should say you gain temporary hit points now when you transform. That's the one big difference. When you assume a wild shape form, you get temporary points equal to your druid level. So at level 2, you get 2 temporary hit points. Obviously, that's pretty garbage. However, it does scale, but not very well, right? If you're like level 8, you're turning into you have max CR of 1, so you can turn into maybe a dire wolf at that point, which is pretty nice. And you gain 8 temporary hit points, but you still have your own hit points, right? Like it's still going through. And this is a change that needed to happen. This was the biggest pain in the ass for dealing with druids, especially Circle of the Moon druids, which are the ones that we're using in combat, is they could turn into like a freaking bear at level 2, and the bear has 30 or 40 or 50 hit points. And you just get all that extra hit points. There's nothing in the game that even comes close to putting that much of a buffer, that much of a defensive shield up for the players effectively. And the druid could do that twice per short rest. That's crazy. It's awesome for the player, but it feels real terrible as a DM because you feel like you're not doing anything as a DM, right? And the player's like wants to be like, oh, like attack me, like I'm the tank, like because I don't care about these hit points. And DM are like, yeah, I don't care about these hit points either. Like it's just I'm not doing anything to you basically. So even though the AC maybe wasn't that good or something, so it always felt really bad. And I appreciate this rule, and that it has a compromise with the temporary hit points. Although we'll see when we get to Circle of the Moon discussion how they kind of give you a little bit more of a boost there because those are designed to be your combat form. So I think your restrictions are generally the same. Although you can take swimming speed. There's no more swimming speed restrictions on here. There is a flying speed. You can't fly as a beast until you get to Druid level 8, which is just awesome for like scouting purposes. And again, you're pretty limited. Also, known forms. You're technically, I don't think that was a thing in 2014. You're limited to very specific stat block forms that you can take, and then you gain more as you level up. And I always liked having a homebrew rule where I literally did it like Animorph style, where you had to like make some kind of skill check and be in contact with the animal and like to gain that kind of check, but instead you just kind of unlock them as you level up, which I'm totally fine with. I think that's definitely fair. So I'd leave everything else the same. You can't cast spells, but shapeshifting does not break your concentration, so you can remain concentrating on a spell that you have. But and then now you don't get 2 back on a short rest. Gosh, that's also a big difference. So now instead you have a wild shape uses table, which starts off at 2. When you get to level 6, you then get 3, which is pretty much going to be there for the rest of your career until you get to the pretty high levels. However, similar to... Sorry, my nose is just really going crazy now. Like the Channel Divinity and some other abilities that are back on a partial rest, you only gain 1 use when you finish a short rest. So, which is a definite nerf. Before, you regained all uses upon a short rest. You regain now all uses when you finish a long rest. So that's a pretty big deal, which means you're going to be able to, or you're limited to short resting. Sorry, you're limited to wild shaping not nearly as often as you were. However, we'll get into how they, again, compromise it with a later ability. So at level 2, you can expend a use of wild shape, again, when you get wild shape, to cast Find Familiar. So maybe you don't want to do the shape shifting, especially because you're limited to shape shifting a very tiny animal or something. So maybe you want to just summon your own animal companion friend via Find Familiar, and thus you get your little animal companion. Now, this is not a big combat shape. You're not the ranger, beastmaster, or whatever. This is something that's, a pretty small little ally that you can take. However, you can cast it without material components. I believe normally it's supposed to cost like 10 gold or something when you cast it. It does cost your wild shape usage, but probably the preferred way to use wild shape for those that don't want to necessarily just transform you want to still be able to use your own character and your own spells and all that, but still have a base function for your wild shape ability. So I think that's pretty nice. Level 3, we get our subclass. We'll go into that later. Level 5 is a new way to regain wild shape uses back. We can gain a wild shape we can expend a spell slot to regain a use of wild shape. and we can use Wild Shape to give ourselves a level 1 spell slot. The latter we can't do until we finish a long rest. You can only use it once per, which makes sense because we're getting the Wild Shape back on a short rest, at least one, so you can see why you'd be able to abuse the system a little too much if they had that be unlimited. Again, there are subclasses that use Wild Shape uses, and I just think that's, at some point, you're basically sort of equivalent of casting Find Familiar with a level 1 spell slot, if you think about it, because a Wild Shape is equal to a level 1 spell slot. But it's nice to be able to do that, and especially if you are the Circle of the Moon and you want to just keep on shifting and be able to Wild Shape more, even though you're like, gosh, I only get one back on a short rest. Well, you can just expend a spell slot. Previously, you could expend a spell slot to heal yourself. Now you can expend it just to give yourself another Wild Shape. No action required, by the way, which is pretty nice. New abilities, I believe these are brand new, is Elemental Fury and Improved Elemental Fury. Again, pretty much the same as the Cleric, which I'm a little disappointed by. Like, it seems fine, but can we make the Druid a little more distinct, I guess? Like, it's the exact same thing where you can either choose to gain additional damage when you attack, and it does work for your Beast Form's attack, which is interesting, or you can add your Wisdom modifier to the damage you deal with Druid cantrips. I'm pretty sure that's the exact same of how it works with the Clerics as well. And at level 15, it improves in different ways. However, the Primal Strike just doubles the damage, whereas instead of the cool, like, I think it was a temporary hit point heal thing you could do with the Cleric, now it's just your spell range increases by 300 feet when you cast a Druid cantrip with a range of 10 feet or greater. I haven't seen if there's any insane combos with that, but I can't imagine it. And almost very rarely do you need spells to go that long in all the games I've played. Like, occasionally it matters if a spell has like a 60-foot range versus a 120-foot range. Is probably the most common one where you're like, I can't quite reach it with this spell. But needing to cast a spell at 300 feet, I think visibility is the biggest concern. Level 18, you can now cast spells in Beast Form, which is pretty awesome. Although, how good is your Wild Shape is CR1, I guess, at that point. Nice, but we're level 18 before I have to get it. And then level 19 is the Epic Boon. Level 20, Archdruid, is you regain one use of Wild Shape whenever you roll initiative, and you can convert uses of Wild Shape into spell slots better than what you could do at level 5. So now you can convert them into 2 spell levels. I think up to, for example, you can 2 uses of Wild Shape and reach a level 4 spell slot. Once you use this benefit, you can't do so again too. So it's still limited by a long rest. This is a level 20 ability. But I appreciate that it's not just like, one level of the Druid in 2014 version is like, you age slower. I was like, okay, well, is that really going to come into play in our campaign? Probably not. So at least all of this kind of makes more sense in the context of the campaign. In terms of Druid spells, I don't think there's anything too much more than what I mentioned with the Cleric, but we can, let's see, healing is better, which with the Cleric. The ones that I did notice, 2 I want to point out is Bark Skin is a heck of a lot better now. It's no longer concentration, and it is now an AC of 17. I believe previously it was an AC of 16, and it's a bonus action. They really buffed the crap out of this spell. So, and it lasts for an hour. I mean, this is fantastic. So if you think about it, if you're willing to spend a level 2 spell slot, you really don't have to worry about having really sexy AC, or you could just give it to, presumably your front line would have a better AC of 17, I would hope, in 5e by, I guess by the time you get level, let's see, a 3rd level, by the time you're casting 2nd level spell slots. But for you, especially, it could be nice. And yes, you can cast this before Wild Shaping. It doesn't even require concentration, so it'll be pretty easy. And would give you a 17 AC for the next hour, which is going to be pretty awesome. Although we'll get into Circle of the Moon, which kind of has its own built-in AC. The other thing I want to point out is the new summon. There's a whole series of summon spells, basically, but you get the Summon Beast as early as 2nd level, which again is a 3rd level character. It is concentration, but it lasts an hour, and you can call forth a very unique bestial stat block stat sheet, which scales with the spell level, which is nice, so it keeps on being useful. But this is a really cool creature you can summon. Especially you could summon a flying creature that has flyby, which means it doesn't provoke opportunity attacks, so it can just fly around and be absolutely awesome against like melee, for example. Your multi-attack scales, your regular attack scales. The hit points are, I think, mostly fixed. It does say you get +5 hit points for each spell level above 2. So it also scales, I guess, but not very well in later, probably in the later game. But still, for having, it does require concentration, but for having that, animal companion that you can summon as early as 3rd level, I think that's pretty spiffy. So Shout out to Summon Beast. All right, so now we're going to go over the Druid subclasses, beginning with the Circle of the Land. This one is from the 2014 Player's Handbook and is kind of your default Druid, I guess. Like all the subclasses have their one kind of default. You're just like, I just want to do what I'm doing, but better. It doesn't really have any necessarily extra unique abilities. The big difference here, you gain a bunch of new spells depending on which land you want to be associated with. And the 2014 version had like 6 of them, and they had more spells. This one has far fewer. I don't know why the character monster doesn't show them either. It's very annoying, but I've got the book in front of me. This one only has, well, it still has a lot. It says 3, actually it has 6. Maybe it was like 8 in the other one or something, but it doesn't have as many lands you can choose from. There's only 4: arid, polar, temperate, and tropical. However, there's a big change here with Circle of the Land. Now, instead of choosing one and just that's what you are, instead it's every time you finish a long rest, you can actually change what type of land, which means you're changing all of your bonus spells that you have access to. So Arid has like Burning Hands, Firebolt, Fireball. Polar has Hold Person, Sleet Storm, Fog Cloud. Temperate gets a Misty Step, Sleep, Lightning Bolt, Freedom of Movement. Tropical has Polymorph, Stinking Cloud, Web. A lot of different cool, like kind of wizardy options you can include there. And when you level up later in the class, there's another, let's see, feature level 10. You have resistance to the damage type associated with your current land choice in the circles feature, which Arid is Fire, Polar, Cold, Temperate, Lightning, and Tropical Poison. Gaining resistance at level 10 and being able to choose, like change your resistance on any long rest is very, very cool as well. At level 3, you gain a new feature where you can spend a use of Wild Shape. I think they did this because they want like every subclass to be able to spend Wild Shape on something new, similar to the Cleric, how the Cleric also you can spend your Channel Divinity on something new whenever you take a subclass. In this case, you can basically cast the spell Wither and Bloom. Not exactly that spell, but that spell was like an AoE damage, and then one person could roll a hit dice and heal themselves. This is a similar thing, except instead of rolling a hit dice, you just heal them 2d6 hit points. And then it does scale as you level, but not until level 10 does it increase to 3d6. So normally you do 2d6 to everybody in a 10-foot radius sphere, so kind of small. It's a con save. And then one creature can regain 2d6 hit points. And then it starts off probably really great at 3rd level, I imagine. Like 2d6 is pretty great. And for a wild shape use, so in case maybe you're out, you just don't want to spend a spell slot or something. And again, you get the wild shapes back every short rest. So I think of this as like a 1 per short rest ability. And pretty good, but then once you get into like level 7 or 8, and you're only doing like 2d6, I don't think it's going to feel very good at all. And then finally at level 10 is 3d6. So I don't think it scales necessarily great, but at least in the beginning it's nice, and does give you another feature for wild shape uses. Level 6 then gives you basically the Wizard's Arcane Recovery, which is one free. First of all, you can cast one of your circle spells, which are all the ones you get from those land ones, which are all the ones I rattled off before, and you can change which ones are. You can cast one of those for free without expending a spell slot. And keep in mind, these scale up pretty high, maybe up to 5th level, I think. Like Cone of Cold, Insect Plague, I think Polymorph is 4th level, but that's pretty crazy. You can cast one of those once per long rest without expending a spell slot. And then in addition, whenever you short rest, you can recover spells, pretty much exactly how Arcane Recovery works for a wizard, where you just get some of your spells back once per short rest, which is going to help because, again, the land one is probably the most spell castery of the Druids. So I think land got a pretty good buff, basically. I haven't even talked about level 14 ability, which is another way you can spend your wild shape. This one is the least impressive because mainly it's at level 14, but you can create this 15-foot cube area that gives everybody half cover, and you can share the resistance you gain from your Nature's Ward ability, which you got at level 10. So sharing resistance is pretty great, but everybody has to be in the same 15-foot cube to do it. And the main reason you're going to want to give people resistance is probably against big AoE attacks. So one way the players can try to fight back against AoE attacks is by spreading out like cockroaches. And instead you're saying like, hey, everybody get in my little nice, AoE fireballing area, and then you can gain resistance. So I have mixed feelings on that. And it uses a wild shape usage, like to just do half cover and the resistance. You can move it around, I guess, but I was less enthusiastic about this one. Plus the fact you have to wait till 14 to get it. But the other stuff is very cool. So land, honestly, pretty big thumbs up. I think it got a big buff. Circle of the Moon, alas. Circle of the Moon was one of the strongest subclasses in the 2014 edition. I'm confident saying that because of how strong Wild Shape was. Because Wild Shape got effectively nerfed in the new edition, that means Circle of the Moon got effectively nerfed. This is also from the 2014 version of the book, where this is the one who wants to Wild Shape into a combat form, basically. So the differences between their Wild Shaping is that the max CR rating is now divided by 3, and you don't take this until 3rd level, obviously. So right when you take it, you can suddenly transform into a CR1 animal. Normally, a normal druid has to wait to level 8 to become that strong of a Wild Shaping class, and yours will scale every 3 levels, basically. You'll be able to do another CR level if I'm doing that correctly. So you'd have to wait till level 6, and then you can do CR2 at that point. So 6 and then 9, I think, is the other, that CR3. So you get better forms. Your armor class, you have a built-in armor class. Your AC equals 13 plus your wisdom modifier if that total is higher than the beast's AC. More than likely, your wisdom is going to be a +3, if not a +4, and then maybe late game it's a +5. So even a +3 is a 16 AC is a lot better than most beast forms are going to have, and that's usually was the one drawback of the Wild Shaping, beast, is that you had this pool of hit points, but you had lower AC. Well, now they kind of compromised and said, hey, since you no longer have that big pool of hit points, how about you've now got a good built-in AC? It could be AC 17 with a +4 wisdom modifier. I just talked about how, the bark skin skill is a lot better now because it's a bonus action, no concentration, AC 17. Well, more than likely, Circle of the Moon is not going to ever need that because as soon as you transform, you're probably going to have an AC of 17, which is pretty solid, I think, for maybe an off-tank. Also, your temporary hit points have tripled. So normally when you transform into a Wild Shape form, you get 1 temporary hit point per level. It's very, very low. Every bonus is great, but that's just negligible. 3 times your Druid level, however, is a lot more interesting. At 3rd level, that suddenly becomes 9 temporary hit points. That's pretty solid. Not going to let you sit up there and tank forever, obviously, but it's still putting on a pretty good shield. You're at level 5, you get 15 temporary hit points. At level 10, you've got 30 temporary hit points, which is starting to be more in line with what the old Wild Shape was. So I think this is actually a pretty good compromise. Obviously, I haven't seen in action yet, but basically they just changed it where it's no longer fucking broken in the early levels, where a level 2 druid can turn into a 40 hit point bear. Instead, you have to wait till like level 10, really, before you can start getting all those huge amounts of hit points. Do note the temporary hit points does not stack or anything, so that won't work well with other people who can give out temporary hit points. But I think that is a pretty darn good compromise. So you've got the better temporary hit point scaling, you've got built-in armor class, and then you still have your exact same better CR level. All of that, I think, is pretty good compromise, but we're still acknowledging the fact that Wild Shape was overall nerfed. We do get some bonus spells that have to do with like Moon. Cure Wounds is always prepared. Moonbeam, Starry Wisp, Conjure Animals. That's kind of a cool feature. They kind of went more with the Moon theme, which I respect, I guess. Also, each of your attacks in Wild Shape form can deal normal damage or radiant damage. Used to be, I believe, that you could bypass magic resistance. That is no longer a thing now, but I also don't know how much of a thing, or not magic resistance, sorry. If a creature had resistance to regular weaponry except for magical weapons, then you could bypass that. I haven't seen if that's going to be really a thing in this new edition, so it's interesting they don't have that anymore. Also, you can add your wisdom modifier to con saving throws. That is humongous. While in Wild Shape form, really means that you want to cast a concentration spell and then Wild Shape, because your con saves are going to be pretty darn good at that point, so that's pretty fantastic. Keep in mind, by the way, you no longer have those extra damage in the Circle of the Moon, but that's because the baseline Druid had extra damage. So at level 7, if you recall, you would obviously take Primal Strike if you're going Circle of the Moon, and then you can add an additional 1d8 of Cold, Fire, Lightning, or Thunder damage every time that you attack, which is going to feel a lot better if you're doing the Combat Wild Shape form. That's at level 7. At level 10, this is a huge buff and a way big new thing that you get. Moonlight Step. You get basically Misty Step, but it's even better. As a bonus action, you teleport to 30 feet, and you have advantage on the next attack roll you make for the end of this turn. So you fucking Nightcrawler, where you can just teleport in and attack somebody, which is awesome. And you can use it a number of times equal to your wisdom modifier, which is probably going to be 3 to 5 times per long rest. You can also regain uses by spending a level 2 plus spell slot for each use you want to restore. I believe Misty Step is also a level 2 spell, so effectively you just gain fucking Misty Step with an even better effect with an advantage on the next roll. That's awesome. Have to wait to level 10 to get it, but that is a very, very big buff. That's going to feel really cool as a wild shaping attacker to be able to get those free Misty freaking teleports around. And then at level 14, you can deal an extra 2d10 radiant damage when you hit with a wild shape form attack. That's a huge boost right there. And also, whenever you use your special Misty Step, they call it Moonlight Step, you can also teleport a willing creature. So big buffs, but we acknowledge that Moon did kind of get nerfed overall because of the wild shape nerf. Circle of the Sea, I think, is brand new, which they like to include a brand new one for the 2024 edition. I like the idea of an ocean-themed druid. I think that was definitely lacking and we needed it. But I can't say I'm too excited about it. The whole thing, this whole subclass rests on this ability called Wrath of the Sea, which is a usage of your wild shape. So I guess Moon is the only one that doesn't have another use of wild shape. That's because your base wild shape combat ability just increased so much. So as a bonus action, you can expend a use to create a 5-foot emanation, which is just kind of an AoE around you, that takes the form of ocean spray that surrounds you for 10 minutes. And then whenever you manifest it in as bonus actions, you choose another creature within it, you force them to make a con saving throw, and they take cold damage equal to a number of d6s equal to your wisdom modifier, which does scale pretty well, and they are pushed 15 feet away from you. That's a pretty nice effect. And I believe it does not require concentration. You can keep it up for 10 minutes per wild shape, and it only costs a bonus action to activate it and a bonus action to keep doing it, which is nice. It gives you a pretty good, cool bonus thing to do. And the damage scales pretty well. You're probably going to have at least a 3d6 or 4d6 that you can force on them. Probably the biggest deal is being able to push creatures away. 15 feet away from you is also very nice. Anytime you have any battlefield ability to move monsters around, it's very effective. In my experience, my players are very, very good at, if I introduce a cliff or a river or something, like some enemy is getting pushed in that thing. Because that's like their whole goal is just to yeet their enemies off of cliffs or pits or whatever it is. So being able to do that as a druid is awesome. Now it is limited, very limited. It has to be within 5 feet of you, though. That is tricky. So you're kind of almost using it as a defensive. Like you really don't want to, I don't think, run up to people and do. Oh, maybe you do if you get it off. The bad thing is it's a save or suck, I believe, which means nothing happens if they make the save. It is against your spell save DC, which should be pretty good. But Constitution saving throw, a lot of monsters are going to have pretty good con saves. So if they succeed, you're just kind of shit out of luck and you've got that enemy right next to you, which is going to feel bad. So I would probably use it more defensively, where if somebody comes up to me, then you want to use that effect. Now it gets better at level 6, where it literally doubles to 10 feet, which suddenly gives you a lot more options, I think, 10 feet around you. And you gain a swim speed equal to your speed. However, this pisses me off because you're a Druid of the Sea, and you're telling me that my Druid of the Sea, Circle of the Sea, what do they call it, doesn't gain a swim speed until level 6? That's ridiculous. Come on now. Like, the whole thing is your ocean themed. You should be able to gain that swim speed earlier. That's dumb. So I think that's annoyed the crap out of me that I have to wait till level 6. Level 10, only while your Wrath of the Sea is up, which it costs at wild shape usage. It's a bonus action, lasts for 10 minutes. You gain a fly speed equal to your speed. That's humongous. That means suddenly you could use this out of combat to reach different places. That's pretty awesome. You also gain resistance to cold, lightning, and thunder damage. In certain campaigns, that's amazing. But just gaining 3 resistances at once is very cool. So all of those passive effects, you have to like that feature, right? Because like all of these things are tied to that feature. And even the level 14 ability as well. Now you can manifest your Wrath of the Sea around somebody else within 60 feet, and they gain all those effects, like resistances, fly speed, all that. Or you can spend 2 uses of Wild Shape to manifest it around both of you. You can do it against an ally and yourself. So the whole thing rests on you liking this ability. Basically, every single part of this subclass, you have to be on board with this Wrath of the Sea. As I mentioned, plus just the fact that they describe it as like ocean spray surrounding you sounds really stupid to me. I don't know. I would do more of an actual like whirlwind of water or something, I guess. But then it's weird that it only affects like one person at a time whenever you target them with it. So I I guess thematically I couldn't quite wrap my head around how it looks and everything. And then mechanically, I do like the idea of the damage scaling for wisdom and being able to push people around. But if they make the save, like nothing happens. I don't know. And it does level up as you go. But to me, I was disappointed in this overall build, I guess. You do gain a lot of extra spells, though, for your Circle of the Sea spells, which is pretty cool and thematic. Gust of Wind, Shatter, Thunder Wave, Lightning Bolt, Water Breathing, Conjure Water, Conjure Elemental, a whole lot of extra cool spells. That's something I should have mentioned, but Circle of the Sea, I'm not quite sure of, and I really wanted to because I really love ocean and water themed shit as well, so that maybe I expected too much. Circle of the Stars is from Tasha's, and is literally, from what I can tell, the exact same, which tells you that they nailed it, I guess, with Tasha's because they didn't change a damn thing. In this one, you have a star map, you have the guidance and guiding bolt spells always prepared. Guiding bolt, very good cleric, like go-to cleric damage spell, not a cantrip. Guidance is a cantrip. I think it's like 46. And you can cast it a number of times equal to your wisdom modifier without expending a spell slot. That is awesome. So that's your go-to damage, basically. And then when you take this subclass, again, you've got your use of wild shape here, but you can enter this unique star form thing. It sounds very monk-like. You shed light, and you choose one of 3 different effects that's always on. So either you gain an ability that lets you make ranged spell attacks at 1d8 plus your wisdom modifier, which is pretty spiffy. Basically turns you into a short bow archer, I guess, at that point. Or you can make yourself give better healing. Whenever you cast a spell using a spell slot that restores hit points, you or another creature within 30 feet can regain hit points equal to 1d8 plus your wisdom modifier, just extra healing, basically. Or you gain... concentration advantages or something when you make an intelligence or wisdom check or con saving throw to maintain concentration. It's not advantage, sorry. It's you always treat a 9 or lower as a 10. That's very, very limiting compared to other things, but maybe you want to be able to concentrate on a really important spell like a banishment or something. However, a really cool effect comes online later as you level up. At level 6, you gain a very cool ability that actually doesn't have anything to do with going into star mode, which I appreciate, unlike the sea mode where like everything procced off of using that ability. This time you can, every time you long rest, you roll a dice, and then you gain a reaction you can use. Depending on if that die roll was even or odd, you can either use a reaction to roll a d6 and add it to a number rolled, or do the opposite and subtract it to a number rolled. Anytime you can change a roll is extremely useful, especially when it comes to like clutch saving throws that players need to make. So very cool ability. You can use a number of times equal to your wisdom modifier per long rest. I really appreciate that. Starry form just gets better at level 10. Additional 1d8 for the archer. Additional 2d8 of healing for the chalice. And while the dragon is active, which is the one that only gives you like the concentration and wisdom checks, probably not one you're going to use as often, suddenly you gain a flying speed of 20 feet and can hover. So that becomes the reason why you want to transform into a dragon at level 10. And then at level 14... you become partially incorporeal and gave resistance to bludgeoning, resistance, and slashing damage. You're basically a raging barbarian at level 14. All very cool effects, and the fact that they didn't change a damn thing shows you how much they nailed it back in Tasha's. So my subclass ranking overall for the 2024 edition, I think I'm actually going to put Circle of Land on number 1, which I'm not too excited about like the default subclass. But in this case... they just did such a good job buffing it, giving it some interesting new abilities. And the fact that you can change which land you're in becomes very tactical and strategic, and maybe even thematic, because you can be in like a new area and like touch the ground and be like, okay, now I've got these powers, basically, which I think feels really cool. Level 14 ability is the only thing that's like, but, you know, how often do we even get campaigns up that high? Like, the other abilities are just... awesome. I think it got a big buff. So Circle of Land is going to be my number 1. I'm going to put Stars at number 2. I think Stars is really cool. I never played it, back when it was in 2014 edition. And the fact that it just didn't get changed at all and it still looks very, very solid. It has cool abilities, gives you multiple options when you go into Starry form. I love the Cosmic Omen feature. All of those are just really cool. Then I think I'm going to put Moon. Although Wild Shape, especially Combat Wild Shape, got nerfed, I think I appreciate the compromise where they give you a cool built-in AC that scales with your wisdom and much more temporary hit points. And really, it's the fact that you gain this amazing Moonlight Step ability. Granted, you have to wait to level 10 to get it, but like suddenly you gain this like awesome form of Misty Step that you can use is awesome. And keep in mind, baseline Druids already can increase all of their like melee attacks with that Primal Strike, so all of that combos pretty well. And then unfortunately, C, it's the new one, but it just didn't really wow me with its effects. I really wanted to like it, but I was annoyed by the swim speed not till level 6. And the fact that like everything procs off this one effect, so you really have to like that one ability. And I wasn't. It's not a terrible subclass, but I think I'm gonna rank it on the bottom of my list. So those are gonna be my subclass rankings, which brings us to backgrounds. And the background discussion is honestly very similar to the cleric because we still care about wisdom the most, which puts at an acolyte, guard, guide, hermit, sage, sailor, scribe, and wayfarer. And we still like constitution because we like concentrating on our spells. So we're still prioritizing constitution for a lot. Probably looking at dex as our third highest, which is basically very similar to the cleric. Maybe we don't care about strength as much because if we're going to be melee attacking, I mean, first of all, we could use dex with a finesse weapon if we wanted to. But more than likely, if we're in melee, we're probably a combat like Circle of the Moon Druid, in which case we've got the strength and dex of the physical form. So maybe those things don't matter quite as much. But Constitution still matters because our hit points matter more than ever because our wild shape still uses our own hit points. So for those reasons, and looking at themes always, I think we're looking at Farmer as being my number one. Although you could argue that Farmer is like the opposite of what a Druid should be, but you could be a very responsible farmer and love the land and everything. Strength, Constitution, and Wisdom. Con and Wisdom are both very good. Strength, honestly, probably not as much for our Druid, but the tough feat, just very good for everybody. Extra hit points, especially helps you with our wild shaping needs. Next, I think I'm going to go with Hermit for number 2. Hermit has also Constitution and Wisdom. Charisma we really don't give a shit about, but I'm always looking at maybe there's 2. If we have all 3 that we like, then great. The Healer feat is good for the Druid because the Druid, like the Cleric, also has access to all of the healing spells. So very helpful there, although I think we already have Herbalism kit, so maybe not so much for that one. For third ranking, I'm going to put Guide, although the same problem is involved with the Acolyte for the Cleric in that we get a free Druid spell, which we don't need because we've already got Druid spells. However, Dexterity, Constitution, and Wisdom could arguably be like the 3 best stats that we're looking for, and obviously Guide is one of the best thematic backgrounds. So I don't think I included Acolyte at all in my Cleric one, but I will include Guide, even as high as my number 3 for the Druid, and extra level 1 spell, whatever. That could still be useful. For fourth, I'm going to say the Sage, because, again, it gives us Constitution and Wisdom. Intelligence is an okay ability score to increase as well. Also, Magic Initiate Wizard gives us a free level 1 Wizard spell, maybe like a shield or something else that we don't have access to. Could be really nice, although it gets less sexy if you do take something like Circle of the Sea or Circle of the Land, where you gain access to a lot of wizard spells. So keep in mind your subclass also is probably going to determine which of these backgrounds that you're going to want more than others. And then I think my number 5 is going to be the Scribe, although it doesn't feel very druidy. Maybe somebody who just studies nature a lot and studies the history of it. I don't necessarily, picture a druid in a monastery, but you gain Dexterity, Wisdom, and Intelligence. I think are all pretty good. No Constitution here, but the skilled feat could be pretty handy. Again, if you want to be more of a skill-happy intelligence druid, I think that's going to be a useful background to take, but also at my number 5. All right, for species rankings, let's go into there. Species, as always, is a little bit trickier because it doesn't have a lot of stats, built in, so it's more kind of flavorful depending on what the abilities are. But my number 1 is going to be very flavorful, and that is the Elf. Elves seem just very naturey in general. If you like one with nature, I also really like Wood Elf for automatically having Druidcraft because it annoys me that Druids don't have access to Druidcraft automatically. Long Strider, Pass Without Trace are good. Increase of speed, but honestly, all the elves could be very thematic and a very nice spell. So that's probably my number 1. Number 2, I'm going to say is the Gnome. Although we do have an annoying overlap here, but advantage on intelligence, wisdom, and charisma saving throws is good, and even when we're wild shaped, we still gain all of our mental saves. Having advantage on those is going to be pretty useful. The annoying thing is that the forest gnome, which feels very thematic with a druid, always has speak with animals prepared, which is the exact same thing that druid always has. So that's a little bit of a bummer. However, we can cast it free, which is mainly useful if we don't probably already have spell casting. However, Speak with Animals is a ritual spell, as I mentioned, so it just takes an additional 10 minutes to cast it. So the free spell, Speak with Animals, is probably not super useful. Minor Illusion's kind of nice, which means if you're really going to be optimizing, you might as well just be a rock gnome and gain Mending and Prestidigitation, and then make a little clockwork toy, I guess, which doesn't seem very thematic with Druid, though, to be honest. Number 3, I think I'm going to say Tiefling, although there's one that I probably wouldn't recommend. Which one would I not recommend? Probably Abyssal, because it's pretty easy to get like poison damage, and you already get poison spray as a cantrip. But having necrotic damage resistance, chill touch, fire resistance, and firebolt, as well as all those various spells. Same thing with the elf. Just anytime you've got extra spells as spellcaster feels pretty darn good to me. And then the other two is kind of tricky. I did look at Goliath briefly, and I wonder if this is true. Maybe one of you can help me out on this. But the Goliath, at level 5, lets you change your size to large as a bonus action, and it lasts for 10 minutes. It doesn't say what happens if you're wild-shaped. Now, obviously, you have to do it a turn later, because wild shape also costs a bonus action. But what if you're wild shape as a squirrel, and you're a level 5 Goliath, and you change your size to a large fucking squirrel? It doesn't actually do anything like mechanically. Well, it does do a little bit. I guess you have advantage on strength checks and your speed increases by 10 feet. But it's not like the effect of the enlarged spell where you gain like bigger things. But like out of combat, like for hilarious shenanigans, that sounds kind of amazing. If that's allowed. I think it's designed to where you're supposed to be obviously medium and you like enlarge yourself to large. What happens if you're like a tiny spider or something? Suddenly at level 5 you can use a bonus action to go to a large spider and like pretend to be a big powerful giant spider. Like, I don't know. It's something to talk about, and it's, I don't know if anybody's brought this up and thought about it, how Goliath and wild shape interact. It was almost tempting for me to put Goliath on there, but a lot of the obviously, Goliath lineages have to do with attacking and being in combat, which I don't think the Druid is necessarily going to be as much. Although, if you are a wild-shaped, combat Druid, then Goliath probably becomes more attractive. Instead, I'm probably going to just put Halfling and Human. I think they're just generically good for everybody. Halfling, of course, has the Halfling luck, which is very useful. Advantage on Frightened saves, free hiding, and then Human, you get the free feat, free inspiration, all that. But the Goliath thing, man, I'm really thinking about it. It's got me thinking. So overall species ranking is elf, gnome, tiefling, halfling, and human. But I do need to know how that Goliath stuff interacts. I'm very curious to see how that works. All right, so we are going to build our own custom druid in the Roll20 character monster. Build new character. So based on everything that you've seen, what do you think I'm going to make? So 2024 Druid, we've got that. We're going to choose it. So we're going to increase our level to 3. We're going to start at that. And we are going to go ahead and choose our... Let's see if I have to scroll down. Okay, so I did miss this on the cleric, by the way. So it does tell you what the yellow exclamation point is for. Because before I was complaining my divine order choice didn't show up, it actually does show up here under the character monster. We are actually going to choose... Actually, yeah, go magician, I guess. Will be another backline druid. And I'm going to select... honestly, I think the stars has me most excited. We're gonna go Circle of Stars. That's what we're gonna go with. So we've got that set up. The idea for this character is somebody who's very dreamy, head in the clouds. I like the idea that the star map has to be like a certain object. So maybe it's something that this person found and they became obsessed with, and just like always staring up at the sky. Species wise, you know, we haven't made just a plain Jane human yet. So I don't have anything, I don't have any strong like ties for this character, maybe like I would others. So I think I'm okay uh, going with human, but I may change that down the line. It could be whatever else. So let's look at human for now. Let's see, select. And I don't think we choose. Okay, it even tells you make this choice later. So we make that later on. Background. So I think when they found this, maybe a crystallized map of the stars or a cool crystal or something, maybe they kind of just got obsessed with it, just stared up at the sky, and lived off on this own little, you know, remote mountain or something, so they could live even closer to the sky. So all of that makes me feel like we're probably looking at like the hermit background, I think, and that gives us some appropriate skill choices that we like, and also gives us the healer feat. So we'll definitely want to be taking some of the healer spells. And as a human, we get an additional feat. So maybe looking at tough would probably be the easiest one to take. Okay, so now we get to choose, yeah, our extra human versatile feat out of all the origin feats. And man, musician's also so good. It's so stupid good. Instrument training. It would make sense for like a dreamy person to take it too. It really depends. If anybody in the party is obviously taking musician, then I wouldn't take it. But I could see somebody who's living alone. Maybe music was their thing that they did, and again, very dreamy and stuff. So you can see why you could take somebody who's not necessarily a bard, but still have musician. It just gives everybody heroic inspiration to allies hear the song. And you're already gonna have it every long rest, so that might be a good one to take versus tough. So yeah, I'm actually like I'm feeling the musician feat. Let's take that one. It's so damn good. Makes you more supportive. All right. I know it's controversial that I roll stats instead of just choose manual, but I think it's fun and part of why we're all sitting around looking for how we roll. So far, I've been rolling pretty low across the board, so let's see how we do here. Okay, I think this is a lot better than what we've done previously. We rolled a 15, a 17, 13, 9, 13, and another 9. Gives us a lot of nothing but odd numbers, actually. So our pluses are going to matter a bunch. And Hermit gives us pluses to Constitution, Wisdom, and Charisma. So obviously we're going to put that 17 into Wisdom. And we only need to up it by 1, which means we can up... In fact, we're probably going to do the thing where we up 3 different skills by 1 is probably going to be the play. The next highest skill I could see being Constitution. I mean, again, we want to do thematic, but we also want to optimize. Dex is probably deserving of a 13. And then what? This hermit who lives alone, but he's got a musician. I don't know. Obviously, I think strength is a 9. I want him to be somewhat charismatic or somewhat intelligent. That's actually a tough one. I don't like playing characters with bad charisma. That is a tough choice. Musician does give us bonus to some intelligence checks, so it'd be nice not to have a -1 on all of our skills. Yeah, maybe he's not great except for the music. So we'll put we'll put the 9 in charisma. All right, so one ability will go. Oh, that's right. We don't have Dex though. Shoot, that sucks. So you can see why choosing a background that had all 3 of them would be a lot better right now, because we can only increase 2 of them by 1. So we can only increase my con and my wisdom by 1 each, which is still great. But now we're kind of left with a wasted space where I will increase my charisma, at least not have a negative charisma. I guess there you go. Clearly, I would rather have increased my dexterity. That would be much better. But oh well, that's the background we're taking, and we're sticking with our theme for now. So that's our stat design. So +4 wisdom at the beginning is great, and +3 con, even without the tough feat, is going to give us some more hit points. Probably not going to be attacking in melee much, but we'll definitely be using cantrip spells, I think, is the idea here. So we get our druid skill proficiency choice. However, hermit already gives us medicine and religion, so we will make sure not to take those, which it does gray them out. Perception, obviously, for somebody who's super into the stars would make sense, and probably Arcana or Nature from there. I don't know if this druid's actually be very good at animal handling and talking to animals. Probably very like sky based and clouds and all that is how I'm picturing it. Human lets us choose anything we want. Which we could even do the dark horse performance. We could randomly be like, yeah, maybe he has got some talent with a music. 'Cause I don't think musician actually gives us any of those proficiencies. Instead, it just gives us proficiency with the actual the keyboard synthesizer. Well, that can't be a real one. That's got to be from something else. There we go. So the human skill could be, yeah, let's go with performance. Fuck it. It's probably never going to come up, but for the druid, obviously, if we were playing a party with a bard, I'd probably change my build slightly. So that's our skills we're looking at right now. You'd think nature. Man, it does feel bad not to take nature as a choice. But I think the magician feat will up our nature, right? By additional +4. So it will be like a 5 once all that is plugged in, I think. All right, we've got some spells. So we automatically gain a lot of spells, you can see. Find Familiar comes with being a druid at level 2. Guiding and Speak with Animals comes with being a druid. And then Guidance and Guiding Bolt both come from being Circle of the Stars. So those are all plugged in already. So now we can still choose a bunch of new spells. At level 1, we're choosing 2 cantrips, an extra cantrip from the Magician choice, and then a level 1. I think we get several level 1 spells. Cantrips. Gosh, I hate the spell list on. Oh, we need Druidcraft, don't we? We got to take Druidcraft. I feel like all the Druids should have Druidcraft. Although this guy's not very naturey necessarily. Naturey. There's Druidcraft. Let's add that one. And then I want to take the one that's thematically tied to this whole class as a cantrip, which is Starry Wisp, which I believe is new. Maybe it was included in Tasha's last time. It's a ranged spell attack. On a hit, target takes 1d8 radiant damage, and they also glow dimly for 10 feet and can't benefit from the invisible condition. And then at level 5, it increases to 2d8, to level 11, 3d8, and so on. So just kind of a good basic range attack when I don't want to use, obviously Guiding Bolt or something. All right, and the extra one from Magician, probably. See, we already get guidance. Maybe like a message could be useful. Kind of whispering, pointing, and it's going through. That seems kind of very sky-like. So we'll choose a message. All right, some level 1 spells we can choose. We've already got Guiding Bolt, which is our go-to damage spell. Obviously, we want to take healing spells, so we're looking at taking Cure Wounds. I think we choose 4 at level 1. We'll also go ahead and take Healing Word. And then beyond that, probably maybe a Fairy Fire feels pretty thematic to Circle of Stars, I think. Fairy Fire, it's a go-to concentration, good AoE debuff. And maybe a utility spell. It could be a Fog Cloud. Also feels pretty thematic. Somebody who's obsessed with like the sky and shit. I mean, more of a weather druid than a land druid. Take Fog Cloud. Is Fog Cloud changed at all? Let's see. Create 20 foot sphere. Sphere is heavily obscured. Oh, interesting. It does go up if you increase the radius if you use a high level spell slot. Man. Heavily obscured. I wonder if the rules for heavily obscured has changed. All right, and then we can choose. So that one's done. Level 2, we choose an additional spell, but I think we can choose level 2 spells. Level 3. So at level 2, again, going with the kind of sky themed, I think Gust of Wind is pretty appropriate, pretty useful for knocking people around as well. And what else could be good for sky theme? How about Moonbeam? Moonbeam, by the way, no longer you have to wait, I believe. Take a magic action to move the cylinder. The cylinder appears each creature and it makes a con saving throw. So instead of having to wait until the start of their turn, it instead happens right when you cast it. And the creature takes 2d10 radiant damage. Also really good against shapeshifters. So kind of another cool concentration damage spell if we wanted to whip that one out. Well, I guess I have more spells than I thought. So level 2, we still got a level 1 spell. Okay. Well, let's take a probably detect magic. Probably useful. Okay, so everything's got a check mark. There we go. That's a lot of freaking spells to start off with. Level 3 already get 4 level 1 spell slots and 2 level 2 spell slots. All right, equipment choice. Don't have a whole lot of great equipment, but this one probably gives you the most bang for the buck. Quarterstaff, leather armor, shield, sickle, and then the Hermit gives us another quarterstaff, another herbalism kit, a book of philosophy. So in that case, I'll probably take the gold. Probably rather take the 50 gold because there's a lot of overlap there. So 59 gold. I don't know what that's going to get us, but we'll talk to the DM about how that can help us. All right, so new characters. Encircle the Stars. How about Orion? Based on probably the most famous constellation in the night sky that most people know. Save and exit. So there we go. There's our level 3 Druid, 27 hit points. AC, I don't think we're wearing any armor at the moment. Oh, cool. It has all the different effects on there. I guess we'll have to actually add what they do in terms of being able to transform. But we have a ton of options. Our wild shape allows us to activate our starry form. We have a ton of spells that we can do. So I'm pretty stoked about playing a Circle of the Stars character. Ironic because I love Druid specifically because of the wild shape thing, though. So you can see why I didn't want to necessarily make a Circle of the Moon wild shape, and I get why, if that was your whole thing that you liked about the Druid, it might be a little disappointing, or at least very back down to earth, because I do think this was a necessary nerf for the Druid. But the Druid is still such a big, it's a full spellcaster class with extra abilities. My one probably overall disappointment in the 2024 Druid is how similar they copy pasted the cleric stuff onto the Druid. Granted, it works well from a technical standpoint, but like thematically, if you're, especially if like me, where you're just going through these back to back, you're like, wow, these are just kind of one to one from cleric and druid. They're already kind of similar because they had similar spells and they were both, wisdom based spellcasters and all that. So I was hoping we could have a little more distinction there. The biggest distinction still is the wild shape versus the channel divinity, and I think the subclass, for the most part, do a good job of using that wild shapes in different ways. All right, thank you everyone for watching this class breakdown video. You can look for more D&D 2024 content on the channel, as well as all the usual live streams and reviews. You can support my work at patreon.com/Rogue Watson. Shouts to Platinum patrons Joe, Will, Thomas, Stan, Brendan, Jensen, Eclectic Roleplayer, Earl, Christopher, Corey, Big Nut, John F, John L, Nathan, Caprice, Counselor, Andrew, The Relder, Stephanie, Patrick, Jason, Ismail, Amit, Libby, Spud, Sharni, Warden, Harold, Udemoni, LLC, Tom, AJ, They're Eating the Dogs, Luis, Caleb, Chad, and Luca, and Gold patrons RPG, Papergram, Spree Boy, and Yuma, Douglas Lounge, Jerome, Nathan, Pascal, Torres, Scott, Rufus, Carrie, Jen, Glenn, Marcus, and Mark. Thank you all very much for your support.